Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vibhuti Sinha, Chief Cloud Officer with Savient. Thank you all for coming and joining me in today's session about putting governance in your DevOps process. I know it's late, so I'll try to wrap it up very quickly. We'll try to make it interactive. If you have any questions, we can take it up after the session gets over in probably 15-20 minutes. So with that being said, let me first share some of the first learnings I had as part of my cloud journey. I started that a couple of years back, and I have made my own fair share of mistakes, and I would like to start sharing with that. I was really fascinated by the fact that when you think about cloud, it was so easy to create your environments. You can deploy your code, you can kick tires, you can stand up a working environment. But then I also realized that it was very easy to create an insecure environment and also to lose control, especially with respect to costs. So that was the first and the hardest lesson we learned in our journey. The second interesting learning we had was I had gone through a series of audits in my enterprise days. And when I had to go through the same series of audits in my cloud journey, I realized that I can very easily take those compliance rules, the compliance mappings which I have learned over the years in the enterprise space. I can easily retrofit them onto my cloud environment and get going. And again, I was wrong about that because when you think about achieving compliance on cloud, it's a very different ballgame altogether. Your enterprise-focused risk signatures, your enterprise-focused compliance rules do not fit one-on-one, especially with respect to a cloud ecosystem. And last, but one of the most important aspects, and this is something which I keep on hearing in a lot of my conversations when I go and talk to organizational InfoSec directors or infrastructure directors or DevOps directors, they mention that, yeah, I have automation built in. I do not need a layer of governance on top of it because governance is going to slow down my DevOps processes, which is the core strength of having and adopting a DevOps process. Well, again, it's not correct, it's not accurate because you definitely need a layer of governance on top of your automation. Automation cannot substitute governance. Automation is definitely needed. There is no doubt about it. Everyone here in this room understands the scale at which cloud has to operate, the scale and the velocity with which drift management is done, and it takes place in cloud. So automation is a no-brainer, but having a layer of governance on top of that automation design principle is imperative, it's important to have. And we'll talk about the details about this later on. So with these set of learnings, what we came up with was a set of security and governance themes, which is needed for your infrastructure as a service and your DevOps ecosystem. Number one being the visibility, compliance, and prevention dimension. When you think about visibility, many people think that visibility is all about knowing what your vulnerable security misconfigurations are, where are your vulnerable VMs, where are your unencrypted databases running. Well, that is just one aspect of visibility. There are two more dimensions to visibility. Number two, and which is very important, is getting the visibility of access, as in who is having access to your resources, how are they getting that access, and in what context they have that access for. And then the third aspect of visibility is about the usage visibility. If you have given privileged access to your identities, what are they really doing with that privileged access? Are they even supposed to be using that privileged access? And are they using that privileged access in its full capacity? So that's one aspect of the first theme. The second theme, as I was mentioning earlier, about compliance. So once you have the visibility, the next logical step, the next logical extension to that is you start mapping those visibility controls, your risk signatures, to industry standard compliance controls and compliance framework standards. And the last one, which becomes very interesting and important, is let's say you have achieved compliance. You were aiming for getting a 100% PCI DSS compliant. You were looking for achieving SOC 2 compliance. How do you ensure that you stay compliant in a continuous manner? See, with cloud and with a DevOps ecosystem where your drift is so high, the velocity with which changes are being made are so high, that it becomes very, very important to strategize and think about staying compliant in a continuous manner very early when you are trying to go on that journey. There are cases, I think a lot of you would be knowing, that companies like Netflix, Intuit, they launch thousands and thousands of workloads on a daily basis and then they kill it. How do you ensure that your ephemeral environment, your transient VMs, they stay compliant in a continuous manner? And how can you enforce your baseline security policies so that your environment is compliant and governed properly? So that would be the last aspect or last dimension of this. The second angle to this, or the theme, would be around identity governance and administration. For example, the classic problem of joiner, mover, leaver scenarios. Let's say your developers are working on projects and they have been given access to Chef environments, they have been given access to Chef cookbooks or AWS objects. When they join your organization, how can you control and how can you govern their access on the respective Chef entities or AWS entities or Azure entities? Similarly, when they are moving between projects, when they are moving between business units of your organization, how do you ensure that they get the least privileged access on these entities? How do you ensure governance around that? And then last but not the least is the theme about privileged access management. Privileged access management in cloud is very different as compared to how people have or organizations have been solving the PAM needs in enterprise. Number one, when you think about DevOps ecosystem as a whole, your CI/CD processes, your cloud as an ecosystem in itself, there are so many conduits through which you can gain privileged access. People can get privileged access on Chef environments through its management console, AWS management console. They can have privileged access using CLIs. Now you even have serverless functions which can have privileged access on your entire infrastructure. So if you have so many conduits, how do you ensure that privileged access is managed and governed properly? And number two, which is even more challenging, is how do you monitor that privileged access? All of you here know the sheer volume and velocity with which audit activity gets generated in these kind of environment. It's very easy for a small or a middle-sized organization to generate terabytes and petabytes of audit activity. Now, the important question is, how do you crunch all that information? How do you sift all that information? How do you deduce meaningful information out of it to figure out what your privileged users are really doing with that? So let's take a deep dive and understand each of these themes. Number one being visibility, compliance, and prevention. As I was explaining, when you think about visibility, always strategize and always think about calculating the access information on your objects in a continuous manner. Because if you think about strategizing and doing this in a scheduled manner, or let's say doing it once a month or several weeks in a span of time, it's not going to scale well. Since your environments are transient, since your environments are moving, having the visibility both on access as well as your infrastructure vulnerability requires you to constantly crunch, constantly scan your environments. So when you are evaluating any products, when you are devising any solutions or strategizing how you should be thinking about visibility, that's one key factor you have to think about, and that is continuous scanning of your environment to gain that kind of a visibility. And one other aspect I would like to say is that especially with respect to access visibility, you know that in infrastructure services, those permissions are defined by large JSON blurbs, your JSON objects. If you want to really understand who has got access to what, you have to think about a strategy or a solution which can scale and scan those hundreds and thousands of JSON blurbs or JSON objects. Just looking at a high-level metadata is not going to give you that fine-level visibility. And having that fine-level visibility becomes extremely important. So once you have the visibility, the next aspect is to start mapping them onto your compliance controls. Now, as I mentioned earlier, do not try to retrofit your enterprise-focused risk signatures and map them onto your compliance frameworks. There are a couple of reasons why. Number one, depending on what layer of cloud computing or what DevOps construct you're thinking about, your compliance mappings would change. For example, if you're working on a SaaS solution versus on an infrastructure service, the concept of, or the ownership or the accountability of who should be responsible for ensuring that data is encrypted completely changes. So think about that aspect, number one. Secondly, invest in third-party products, especially who are well-versed with how these compliance frameworks map and compliance frameworks get mapped to these DevOps tools. Allgres is one organization who are really good in doing that, and it's a free tool. You can always look at that. It will help you to tell which compliance controls should get mapped to what risk signatures you are thinking about doing in your ecosystem. Another aspect of compliance mapping is that do not try to build a solution or a strategy which is just going to give you a dead report saying that these are my controls and I'm not compliant against these controls. Always think about adding another and extra element of remediating those controls itself. The reason being is cloud, again, being a very transient environment, it requires you to constantly work with that drift and ensure that you stay compliant in a continuous manner. And how we do that is, let's say you want to enforce a baseline security policy saying that anytime a leaky S3 bucket comes in or a cookbook is creating a database which is unencrypted, or it's creating a VM which is being attached to an EBS volume which is not encrypted again. And if, let's say you are being a financial organization, for you, PCI DSS is very important. So in order for you to ensure that you stay compliant, look for solutions, strategize for controls which can continuously look for these kind of vulnerable events and start alerting you, start taking actions on behalf of you so that you do not have to scale up your operational team or operations team to go and start doing things in a manual fashion. So long story short, achieving compliance is important, but for you to stay compliant, you have to think about solutions, you have to think about investing in strategies which can help you in continuous controls monitoring and letting you be compliant in a continuous manner. So with that being said, let's take a look at our next theme, which is about identity governance and administration. Very classic example of joiner, mover, and leaver scenarios. You have identities who join your organization, and now they need, let's say, access to Chef environments. They need access to GitHub repos. They need access to Jenkins pipelines. How do you ensure that they get the right set of access initially? Now, there are several different ways in which you can think about doing that. You can have a self-service request-based portal. You can have a delegated administration-based model, or you can create automated rules or policies which can go ahead and start creating these access and provision these access to these different constructs. Well, it used to work nicely in an enterprise fashion, but now when you think about doing this at the scale of the ecosystems we are talking about, it does not scale well. You cannot have people requesting for hundreds and thousands of S3 buckets, or you cannot have people requesting for hundreds of Chef cookbooks. Even if you do it in an automated fashion, your system will start showing fatigue because there are so many things getting created, provisioned and deprovisioned on a day-to-day basis. So that is why it becomes important that you introduce the dimension of risk in this overall equation. What I mean by risk here is what your peers are having access. Can you do an outlier analysis and tell that what you have been doing versus what you have done today and which is creating a deviation in that baseline pattern? When you think about adding risk to your overall identity governance and administration processes, you're actually making the system very intelligent. The reason being is, if let's say, if someone is requesting that access, rather than system asking you to raise a request and give you that access, if the system itself can detect and define that, yes, you belong to a group of people, your peers already have this access and you should be having that access, it raises that request on your behalf. And secondly, it empowers your managers or your system who is going to approve that request, saying that this particular request is not going to create any violation because the peers have this request. Or they can even further empower it by saying that this is actually a request which is not following in this peer group, and it's going to create an outlier violation. That's number one aspect of introducing risk. The second risk, we all are pretty much aware of the licensing issues, especially with cloud systems. How can you ensure that when people are requesting for access, they do not create a system in which you're going to have issues with your licensing? Or let's say you have another rule which says that any developer who is trying to get an access to a Chef's dev environment, or let's say Azure's dev account or subscription, they should not be having the same set of access on the production constructs. How do you define that in a continuous and intelligent manner? So that is where you have to have a system which can do separation of duties on your behalf, which can calculate these aspects in real time. And when the system is trying to do or create request or create some rules which are being done in an automated fashion, it calculates all that for you and it takes decisions based on you. So all in all, what I'm trying to say here is that when you think about identity governance and administration, just do not try to create a solution or do not try to create a strategy which does not have intelligence baked in. Intelligence using the dimension of risk becomes extremely important for an environment which keeps on changing, which is so transient in nature. One last aspect of IGA here is about risk-based access certification. Many organizations, they have a attestation life cycle which says that every 6 months you should be certifying that your peers, your users should be having this access. Now think about doing this for an environment like Chef or AWS. You can have millions of entities there. If I ask a user manager to go and attest everyone's access, what they're going to do is they're just going to rubber stamp it saying that, yeah, this access is fine. And in reality, it's not going to solve any purpose there. So that is why having a risk factor again introduced for that certification, saying that managers, please certify only 5% of those entitlements which are deemed to be of high risk, and leave everything else because it does not impact the system's security. It does not make the system insecure in any manner. So having that risk exposure and having that risk dimension is very, very imperative when you think about defining a governance layer, especially around your identity lifecycle. Now let's understand privileged access management, which is our last security theme. Privileged access management, if you have to understand it, you first have to understand how is the access assignment done in case of cloud ecosystem. The way your permissions are assigned, they're pretty much static in nature. Once I have made you or your identities have been given a privileged access, that access stays there forever, unless someone goes ahead and revokes it, or you have some automated functions which can go ahead and revoke it. Excuse me. But the challenge is, how do you know that if you have created a privileged access construct, your users or your identities have really used 100% of that privileged access construct? What if your privileged permission construct itself is having more access than what your users are really needing it? Secondly, there are so many conduits through which privileged access can be given. And I'll give you a very simple example here. If you want to make an AWS API call from a command line prompt, when you do that command, when you run that API call, AWS expects you to type in a role session name. And that role session name can be typed in by the user as ABC123 or test123. Surprisingly, when you look at the AWS logs, you will not see the user's identity or the name or the identifier of that user. You will actually see ABC123 or test123 in that logs. Now think about a person who is doing a forensics or doing an investigation about who did this privileged activity, who killed this production database. When they start looking at the logs, they will see ABC123 in the log. There is no way you can tie that identity with that activity which was performed. So having said that, when you think about privileged access management, especially with respect to DevOps and cloud ecosystem, understanding the different conduits through which you can have that privileged access is important. Secondly, having a different solution and strategy for each of those conduits becomes important. And lastly, and most importantly, how do you monitor that privileged activity? So a couple of solutions and guidelines which has worked well with some of our implementations is, number one, do not give privileged access forever. Have a just-in-time administration, have a solution or a strategy, or even if you're evaluating for a product, look for products which can give you just-in-time access elevation permissions. And once that duration expires or once that event expires, your access gets revoked automatically. Number two, depending on which conduit you are coming in from, whether you are coming in from a CLI prompt or you are coming in from a browser management console, or you are using a serverless technology to do your privileged activity, have different set of monitoring capabilities for it. And as I was explaining you earlier, that the sheer volume and velocity with which these logs get generated, think and look for solutions which can do stacking, which can do correlation of those activities and bring it into a big data platform like Elasticsearch, or it could be Hadoop or Apache Spark, depending on how much volume we are talking about, which can ingest that much amount of logs, and then it can start inferring, and you can start crunching that data and start taking meaningful decisions out of it. And lastly, always have a strategy of doing a retrospective certification or retrospective review of that privileged activity, because this will allow you to understand whether your privileged constructs were proper, number one, and whether your privileged access itself needs cleaning, number two. And the last one and the most important one is, who are your identities who are doing that privileged activity, and do they need also some sort of training, or do they need some sort of information sharing sessions so that they understand what exactly a privileged activity can do in an ecosystem like this. So with that being said, it's a wrap. Thank you very much for this session. I hope you all found it informative. Thank you.